Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Lens presented by Jott-Nyx Paranormal. I am Jamie Widener. I'll be your host tonight along with Chad Thomas, or we know as that guy over there. What's happening, Chad? How you doing?
I'm all right. How are you, Jamie?
I'm hanging on. It has been a week and 2 days already. So, you know, my goodness. I know you had a busy weekend. You wanna share what you did Saturday by chance?
Let's see. Oh, we had an investigation at the brewery. Is that what
Yeah,
you're talking about?
that is exactly it.
Yeah. We had a good group at the brewery. Um, Most of them didn't make it the whole night, but that's okay. We had one group leave
Wait,
before the
wait. Do you
last
mean just by
session.
being tired, or
Well, yes, yeah.
drifted into the ethereal there somewhere?
I should clarify that. They got tired. One group left for the at the end of the second session.
Okay.
And then during like my group sort of dwindled away during the last session, and it was like, well, there's just the two of us and one of our friends with us now. So yeah, but it was a good time. We had a little bit of activity, not a whole lot. There was other things going on at the brewery that I think
Yeah,
sucked energy out, and
sure.
just yeah, but it was it's always a good night at the brewery.
Never a bad time to be there. You're right.
Exactly.
Well, I did something that was not paranormal, but it could have been.
Okay.
So, I went to the Fulton Theater. So we know we already talked about the Fulton here before. Obviously it's an age-old active theater,
Hmm.
and I got to see a play called Forever Plaid
Hmm.
about four aspiring young men back in the 50s who were in a boy band, if lack of a better way of calling it, a doo-wop group, and heading off to a gig in from Harrisburg to Philadelphia and got hit by a bus and died.
Hmm.
So they came back though for one last performance from the great beyond, and that was the play itself. So,
Hmm. Yeah, it's a
so
fun musical.
it's really a lot of fun. Yeah, absolutely, and there's never a bad show at the Fulton, of course, either. They don't they have a good track record of winners.
Uh,
Um, but it's sort of paranormally, so paranormal stuff. So I
mhm.
felt pretty good about it. Sorry I missed you guys, but this was a previous commitment that I had to keep, and
Yep.
I'm
No,
glad I did. It was a lot of fun, a lot of fun.
good.
Really good show, actually.
Yeah.
So
I did that show, oh, I don't know how many years ago at the Fulton, but it was a lot of fun then too. So
main stage then it was
it
not main
was.
stage,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but
Yeah.
Anastasia is playing on the main stage right now, so they kind of they have it cornered.
Yep.
But upstairs in the fourth floor, nice small space, intimate
Yep.
crowd,
But
nice.
that's a good show to have in that sort of an intimate space too, because you
Yeah.
feel like you're right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
some crowd interactions, of course. They brought a lady on stage, and she hammed it up perfectly,
oh, well, good.
and all the fun of it.
So,
So
I
yeah,
want
it's
to
cool.
say hi to Todd and Carmela. Bert's with us, of course.
Hey guys, good evening.
So, Jamie, Bert sent me a couple of clips from Tala.
Oh, okay.
Actually, he sent him the Paranormal Lens thing, so I gotta make sure that you're getting those. I don't think they
I didn't get
automatically come to
those.
you.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's just you at this point. So okay, I didn't see them anyway. Maybe I don't have credentials. I might have them, but I don't know what they are. I should say it that way.
Well, I
So
I can set them up that they forward to you.
okay,
I
well,
know
perfect.
we'll work this out.
Well, you got people. You got people either way. All right, and Jim's here. Hey Jim, good
Yep.
evening. Good to see you.
So,
Um, it like everything's great until it doesn't work, right?
uh-huh.
You don't know it's not working until someone says, "Hey, did you get that?"
Right.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to seeing this. As
So,
far away as we get from it, it's still I can't speak for you or anybody else who was with us, but it's still on my mind being there. And that's unusual for me at least, coming out of an investigation, because we move on. We have things, I've done
mhm,
things since then. We've had investigations of our own since then, and
right,
it's been a couple weeks. And man, yeah, it's just I can't not think about it. Like not in a bad way and not in a good way. It's present in the back of my mind every once in a while.
right.
I catch myself remembering experiences there. And
Mhm,
that's a cool thing, to have that leave like an impression on your imprint on you. So
right.
I think that means we have to go back.
Yep.
For me, at least, I have to go back. There's
Well,
something resolved there.
Todd and Carmela go Friday. Maybe
Oh, that's right.
so.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, maybe. Hey, you got to pass through Pennsylvania to get there, so maybe I'll just hop a ride. I don't know.
Oh, I remember one other thing we got from the investigation on Saturday night.
Okay.
I was down in the catacombs. Alex and I were teamed up, and we were down there with a family. It was pretty. Whole group was pretty much a family, and there was a girl and her boyfriend there, and they were sitting up against the candle wall in the lower
Mhm. Sure.
over in the corner, sort of by where the the trap door, not trap door, but the thing that goes down to the you know.
Right.
So they were sitting at the table there against the wall, and we're talking about how it got chilly, and they're like, the girl goes, "My left side just got really cold," and the guy looks at her and goes, "My right side just got really cold."
Ah.
So Alex, go grab your thermal because he's got a good thermal camera.
Mhm.
So he grabs it, and in between the two of them, there is some sort of shape of a very cold spot.
Wow.
And it's even cold. The back wall is cold because
Right. Yeah, it's rock wall, right.
it's darker than the back wall.
Oh,
So,
that's definitely an anomaly then,
yeah,
like,
definitely.
in the room.
It's actually in the team chat, so you'll have to check it out there,
I
Jamie.
had to get there today was a blur. Okay.
So anyway, but yeah, that was pretty interesting. And we smelled cigarette smoke down there.
Aha.
And the girl who was sitting there actually was like, "I feel like I just smoked a cigarette, like that burn in the back of my throat." And we were all smelling the smoke. So there was definitely something going on down there.
Ooh.
So anyway, I think Todd and Carmelo want to come back.
Anytime, my friends, anytime.
And Heather's joined us tonight, so good to
Hey,
see
Heather.
that.
Good to see you.
So, but anyway, instead of talking about what we've done recently, Jamie, what have you found?
Well, I wanna say something before we move on to the
Sure.
topic tonight. I got a chance to look back at last week's episode, and I really wanna just take a minute to say thanks again to Shauna Rigby for joining us and talking about the Doss House. She had, in hindsight, in retrospect, we're in the moment, you don't always get to absorb all the conversation, but I think she has a really great perspective on 2 things. One, the how things should be done in the paranormal field and the
Hmm.
way to do it being 2 different things. The whole culture of family and, anybody who wants to come along can, and the whole journey of finding a place like they have and then just making it be available. Just say open the door and, obviously you have to make reservations. It's a paid event kind of thing, but the pricing
Right.
is so low that I think anybody can afford it, especially in a group setting. Um, and just the access that they're providing to that. I was really, it didn't sink in fully in the moment last week. And, we say thanks and everything for our guests. And, she brought such a lot of information to us, but
Right.
in hindsight, that was such a great moment of just what a cool person, what a cool group. And,
Yeah.
they're really doing it right. And kudos to them. So, okay. So let's talk about tonight, though. So we are here to talk about the Portland tunnels, and many may not know them as that. They may be more familiarly known as the Shanghai Tunnels,
Okay.
but both are the same, I assure you. So, where are we in the world? We are in Old Chinatown in Portland, Oregon, and the when is the mid 1800s all the way through the mid 1900s. So about 100 years of time.
Okay.
So I have a question for you before we start.
Oh, it's not a quiz, is it?
Well, no, no, but it's an honesty question, so answer honestly. All
Okay.
right. Have you ever gone out to a bar, had one too many, and woken up the next morning home in your bed wondering, how did I get here?
Yeah.
Everybody raise your hand if this is you. I'm going to raise two. Okay. So it's more than likely that we've all done this at one time or another. And our return trip was likely due to a friend or a partner or someone we trusted, right?
Hmm.
Okay. Or just good grace. Who knows how, but hopefully it was one of the above, not just luck. So imagine, if you will, not having that good friend and waking up the next morning not in the cozy confines of your place, but in the hold of a ship sailing far out to sea.
Okay.
Ah,
That's
turn.
a different story. Yeah.
It's a different story. So this is how the story of many who have had one or maybe a few too many at the bars that filled downtown Portland, Oregon in the mid 1800s to the mid 1900s unfolded. To best paint this picture, let's look back at the Pacific Northwest at this time. The area was booming with the lumber trade and growing rapidly due to folks looking to strike it rich in mining in the nearby mountains. This influx of opportunity meant that many able bodied men were making way more money than they needed, And as well as doing as what young men often do, they were spending it in local saloons.
Mm.
Additionally, the local ship docks, the docks down in the river, were arriving from all over the world. And since many of their sailors jumped ship, many of the captains needed crew members to be able to return to sea.
Okay.
A need was often met when a drunken or even drugged saloon patron was shanghaied or kidnapped and sold into slavery to a ship heading down the Willamette River and onto the Columbia River and then out to sea. The going rate from a ship captain at the time was $50 a head, so thugs and slavers often made easy money preying on these poor, unsuspecting fellows. To aid in this activity, many local bartenders were conspirators working with the thug, or crimp as they were often called, to drug a likely candidate, making him easier to deal with. Crimps would often jam the victims into small wooden cages with no food or water in the tunnels nearest the docks, and after several days, they would be given a drink of mostly drugs, making it easy for them to get onto the waiting ships. If the Shanghai men were lucky enough to wake up from the concoction, they often found themselves chained to the bowels of a ship very far from shore. Unfortunately, some of those who were Shanghaied escaped and made it back to Portland to warn the others. And as a result, it became more difficult to abduct men, so the thugs turned their attention to women who were alone in the saloons. Countless numbers were abducted to be kept in cages in the tunnels until sold into prostitution to buyers outside the area. During its heyday, it is believed that over 1,500 people a year disappeared through the Portland tunnels. Because this is all illegal activity, there are no official records to prove this.
Right.
So, a kind of heavy thing, right? And the
Mhm.
tunnels were stretched out all over the downtown. The important part of this was that Portland, as it was growing and growing and growing, it's a riverfront community. The Willamette River runs right by it, right through it. And the idea was that not to congest the streets with carts and wagons and all the bulk stuff that comes from the docks, they were digging tunnels and creating tunnels under the streets so that the goods and merchandises could be moved in and out really quickly and easily without being in the way. And the city grew into having a streetcar system, which that track set is challenging sometimes for carts and even cars,
Mhm.
especially in the day when the roads were dirt, plus extra rutting into the road when there's a rainy season in the Northwest, so the ruts would cause problems, and also just people. There's a lot more people there all the time, so they were just trying to get stuff out of the way, and it was just easier to move it that way,
Right.
and we'll get into it in a second, but like anything that's good, something bad can be done with it.
Right. So it almost sounds like Walt Disney's corridor idea.
Yes, exactly.
So
Everything moves away from the sight of the guests and the patrons.
right.
Absolutely. That's a really good analogy. So during Prohibition, the bar and saloon
Hold
crowed.
hold on, Jamie.
Oh,
Bert wants to know, are the
I'll
tunnels still
get
open?
there. Patience, sir, patience. Need a retirement. Oh, crap. Okay, sure. Maybe. All right. So moving ahead a little bit in time, during Prohibition, the bar and saloon crews simply moved underground to speakeasies located all through the tunnels, making it hard for the few law enforcement officers that weren't already on the payroll of local criminals to find them. And that's kind of part of this too. Like there's an underbelly.
Right.
The dark community of this is that there's a lot of crime, and therefore there's a lot of people making money who have resources that can pay off people who would prosecute or jail them, and it's happening. The same opportunities to gamble, purchase drugs, and the services of women existed in the tunnels as they would have had any saloon above should they be open. Old Chinatown also had many different gangs who often had their own tunnels leading to the docks. Through these tunnels, they would sneak in immigrants and contraband, such as drugs, away from the watchful eye of the local police as well as customs and immigration officers. There were always things coming and going through the tunnels. Now, Chad, by now you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with the paranormal, right?
All right.
It
Yeah.
wouldn't be Paranormal Lens if we didn't talk about that. So, one of the key locations to access the tunnels was, and still is, through the Merchant Hotel. And this is one of those grand properties right smack in the middle of downtown, the old town. Here you may find a spirit called Nina, who is still the resident ghost. Nina's story is that she was sold into prostitution of a then thriving white slavery market. She was approached by traveling missionaries to provide information on those exploiting her in exchange for freedom from the world's oldest profession. Seeing a chance to escape from a past she did not choose, she quickly accepted. However, soon after Nina was found dead at the hotel, she had been thrown down an open elevator shaft. The Merchant Hotel has long since closed and is now the location of Old Town Pizza. Nina, though, is still there, and in the early morning or at closing time is when she is most active, floating and moving through the restaurant, moving chairs, as well as items on the tables and the kitchen to let employees know that she's still there. When it is still, the observant person can hear her delicate footsteps tap across the floor. She is often seen in either a white or black dress and carries a faint smell of perfume when she is present.
Hmm.
Some other examples from PortlandGhosts.com. Deep within the tunnels, travelers report the atmosphere to be thick in some areas and having goosebumps, as well as an uneasy feeling, as if someone they cannot see is watching them from the shadows. In the tunnels, people report seeing an Asian man quickly walking past them. Explorers name the spirit Sam and say that he is responsible for turning off the lights in the bar basements. Sam also likes to move things around in the tunnels as explorers walk by. One tour guide reported hearing a voice calling out the name Sam over and over again. It echoed through the tunnel and scared his guests. Because his entire group was behind him, he knew that it was not one of them. He says it was one of the scariest experiences of his life. Most tunnel tourists say that Sam is a good ghost and look forward to feeling his presence. Others report seeing quick movements of shadows and feeling ghostly fingers on their shoulders when no one else is around. Other tunnel spirits, known as tricksters, who just love to have a good time. They will often pull at your shirt tail or gently tug at the ends of your hair. One guest reported feeling a small tug on her shirt before she tripped. She was not injured, but it was an experience she says she will never forget. You never forget the first time you get touched, right?
Right.
I still remember me. So, yeah, it's off-putting. While most of the ghosts in the Shanghai tunnels are reportedly friendly, it is still better to remain cautious. Some people recall feeling unwelcome, like someone or something is watching them. One man remembers hearing childlike whistling just before he was thrown to the ground. After standing up, he turned to see who had knocked him down. Lifting his flashlight, he saw that no one was behind him. The man reported it was the last time he would be visiting the Shanghai tunnels. It doesn't take much now, does it?
No, not at all.
And there's more. HauntedHouses.com shared these stories. In 1902, the drugged, brutally treated Shanghai crew, around 100 men who were chained together in the bows of the four-masted schooner, the Jennifer Joe, died on board when the ship sank in the Portland harbor. Starting at the tunnels nearest the water, every year on the anniversary of their drowning at sea, they rush back as a group, looking for those responsible, hoping to get justice of some sort. Various witnesses have seen them, heard them, and have actually touched by a cold, wet hand. Another. An evil and creepy presence of a bartender, like a likely conspirator with the local crimp, mainly resides in the Lotus nightclub basement, probably the site of a prohibition bar, though he also visits the main bar. Though he hasn't hurt anyone, his aura isn't a nice one. He gets his chuckles scaring the employees. Needless to say, employees don't go down to the basement alone. One brave bartender was alone in the club, cleaning up after closing. He went down to the basement where he heard the CO2 canister going off by itself in the bar upstairs. He hurried upstairs and found a single shot glass turned upside down on the bar. Getting that last drink in. Last call. There it is. During the Prohibition years, the gangsters ran a speakeasy out of one of the basements of the businesses connected to the tunnel that runs between Ringers on Stark Avenue and the Crystal Ballroom located on Burnside Street. Terror reigned when a rival gang showed up, wearing stolen Portland policeman office uniforms, armed with Tommy guns and axes. People at this party and the gangsters who ran it escaped down the tunnel, with the killers close behind them. All was lost, though, when the frightened people came to a narrowing of the tunnel, and they were massacred along with the gangsters without mercy to leave no witnesses. In the Scooter McQuaid's Bar and Grill, a group personal experience happened. A brave group went down to the basement and put their ears upon the bricked-up doorway to the tunnel. They heard a chorus of terrified cries and moans getting louder and louder, coming right at the door they were listening at. They scurried upstairs, and then witnessed the glowing entities rush through the pub, but never quite making it outside before disappearing. Others claim that this group appears coming out of the basement in a panic. Their glowing, almost human shapes rush through the pub, brushing by patrons and knocking over drinks and knocking down chairs as they make a mad dash for the door. This is our group that was massacred.
Hmm.
So there's there's a lot and not a lot at the same time here because unfortunately the tunnels have been sealed for the most part. Although there are now restoration projects in hand to open up history, basically,
Right.
for access. The problem with this, and you've seen a lot of the slides here. The tunnels are either really rough shape. They were never reinforced. With struts and buttressing, um, and therefore they've collapsed, or at least are partially collapsed. So passage is challenging. Anytime you work underground, you're at risk. Go back to the Tommy Knockers episode.
Right.
There's no Tommy Knockers in these caves areas, helping out or supporting the miners or the diggers. Most of these were done by people who weren't professionals. In as far as the tricks of the trade and the craft of actually digging tunnels and mines, like shafts and such. So and it's been 150 years. So 170 years actually by now. So it's, time has done its toll even on the ones that were created well.
Right.
And most of them are under the water table. So there's been, issues just with erosion and corrosion to the materials that were put there. So it's a lengthy process to bring them back in. But there are currently about 1,400 square feet of tunnels open and available, and tours are available on a regular basis. So let me get through some more material here, and I'll wrap up.
Hmm.
So the original intent for the Portland tunnels was a way to move goods between the docks and the inner cities so as not to congest the streets that were already bustling with streetcars and citizens. Like many intended plans, criminals soon found a way to turn things to their advantage. Given the miles of original tunnels and the nefarious reason why people would be in them, I find it hard to believe there isn't activity, especially from those still trying to find their way out. If you go, please know that you cannot get into the tunnels without a guide, and there are two groups offering tours. Check out the Cascade Historical Society or the Portland Walking Tours for more information. We cite some sources we'll discuss.
Hmm.
So, the NewYorkTimes.com, TravelPortland.com, ShanghaiTunnels.com, PortlandGhosts.com, LegendsOfAmerica.com, and HauntedHouses.com.
Okay.
And there's a lot of stuff information wise is really cool.
It sounds like it. So I'm going to go back to Bert's comment before we go any further. So, so you answered that about there's parts of the tunnels open. So my question is, A, does he want to be Shanghaied and work on a ship?
Right.
Does he want to be a Shanghaier, or
Well,
what were they called?
Grimp. He wants to be. He
Shrimp?
could.
He could
Yeah,
be shrimp. Or maybe he just wants to be a tour guide, Jamie. Maybe,
that's true. Man, there's so many options here.
but yes, Bert, there are options.
Yeah. Well, on the first one, the part of the problem, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it, is that when you were working a ship in the 1800s, it's a wooden ship and it's a sail ship, it's a masted ship,
Hmm.
and it takes a lot of work, a lot of hands to do the work. As we moved into the 1900s and at least the early part of the century, we moved from sail to steam,
Uh-huh.
and less manpower was needed because the ship was powered differently. We were raising and lowering sails, doing all the tack work and all the stuff that went with it. So it became less. But when you were on the sea, you were basically coming from, say, Asia over, and then the west coast of the U.S. is the stopping point to unload and refit and reload and take stuff back.
Hmm.
Sailors were on contracts, and sometimes the contract expired by the time they got back, or sometimes they were over it because the journey took a little longer. Other times, people were still in an early part of their contract journey, but they didn't like the work, and therefore they jumped ship. And it's pretty easy to disappear. Once you get into town, you can just change clothes and go up, on your own. You
Right.
know, you don't have to wear a uniform or anything. So, um, I
Yeah.
think I think that was part of the problem. And the necessity came from it of how, okay, what do we do then?
Yeah,
And
we have to have a crew to go back. The other part of that is living on a ship is you've got the work, but you also have just living on a ship. You're in cramped quarters.
Mhm.
You're in hammocks. In that time, you were in hammocks that were strung like so many people in a room. It was crowded.
Yep.
Scurvy was a real thing.
Yep.
Because you didn't have fresh fruits and vegetables. You were eating dried meats, it was all stuff that could be barreled and
Yep.
saved for a journey. And fresh
Totally.
fruits and vegetables were a limited thing. Um, the work was hard. The weather was hard. You were pitching at sea, like
Mhm.
so. Yeah, I get where they needed crew because.
And who better to replace them? You're talking like lumberjacks. You're talking about miners who are hard workers, and they're certainly blue collar, what we would call today.
Mhm,
Individuals who could handle themselves and knew how to use tools and such. And once you're out there, once you're out in the sea, at least, I I took a cruise a few years ago, many years ago now, I guess. Gosh, I'm getting there. I'm getting to the age where things don't seem like long ago, but like 12 years ago, 15 years ago, it's a long
mhm, yeah,
um, and with an ex now of mine. But she said the funniest thing was like, the cruise was from Miami down to the Bahamas and back to Key West. It's a short 3-day trip, and
uh-huh.
she liked that. She chose that cruise or wanted to take that cruise because the ship would be close enough to land that if it started to sink, she could swim back.
Okay,
So it seems good on paper. However, you realize that you're miles out, you know,
right,
to get into international waters, and that's part of the trip because there's a casino on the ship. They have to be in international waters to promote gambling or allow gambling.
right,
Um,
which is typically 20 miles.
yeah, that's a little more than I'm going to swim,
Yeah.
But the idea of it was that, and I'm like, no, that's not how this works. we're,
Yeah.
we're not cruising the
Well,
coastline. We're
that
going out.
that sort of ties into Todd and Carmela's question here. Wonder how many that got Shanghai jumped overboard.
Well, some, certainly some, not all. And part of the problem was, the problem for them, those who were shanghaied, was that because they were drugged, and some were suffering injuries and wounds from being shanghaied first before they actually made it to the ship, get to the holding area. Most of the bars had dead drops or trapdoors. And you said trapdoor earlier for the basement and catacombs. It's not that. It's a great
Right.
cover, but they would get to a place in the room, and then the floor would just fall out from under them. And sometimes there was a mattress, probably not.
Right.
Sometimes it was a bale of hay or straw or something like that, which really isn't all that much cushioning, dropping 8-10 feet.
Yep.
So injuries were abound, and then that certainly didn't help them be able to get away.
No.
But once they, if they were lucky enough to be, land gracefully or be abducted gracefully, and they weren't over medicated or drugged to the point where they were injured again by that or harmed by it, there were certainly some able-bodied guys who got out, and that was the
Right.
point to say that once they started getting word out, then they didn't have as many options, with
Right.
men, so they started kidnapping or shanghaiing women.
Yeah.
Because,
Well, if you were Shanghaied onto a ship, you had two choices. It was work, or you probably wouldn't get fed, and
yep.
like,
Yeah, your work was related to your care and
and
your
it,
conditioning of what your
and
experience
if
would
you
be.
didn't help work, you weren't going to get home anyway because
Yeah,
the ship wouldn't go anywhere. So yeah, you didn't have a lot of choices.
yeah, yeah. Who knows how many made it to wherever the Far East destination for the ship was and jumped there instead.
Hmm.
It seems like it was just this endless cycle.
Might that be Shanghai?
Yes, yes, it is. That's actually how it became. Most of the ships were going to China, and Shanghai
Uh-huh.
was a major port. So yes, there is a direct tie there. I'm glad you put that together. I was waiting.
Yeah, I noticed that we haven't had a road trip request on this one though.
Well, Bert wants to go to work, so I have to get there somehow.
That's true.
Um, the thing about this to me, and it's kind of like I said it earlier, like criminals find a way to be criminals.
Hmm.
Like they pivoted. When there was a dwindling supply of male suspects, or victims, they moved to women. And all the while, though, there was gambling, there was drug dealing, there was all kinds of stuff happening underground, and these tunnels are vast. If you pull up a map of Portland, the Merchant Hotel is still there. It's again, it's Old Town Pizza now. It's one of those iconic places that everybody knows where it is in downtown in Old Town.
Uh,
Um, it's probably about a quarter mile to the docks where the docks would have been then. It's not the same now because of technology and advancements and such, but
Right.
they don't really have ships coming in like they did then. It's a quarter mile, half a mile at the most. These tunnels weren't extraordinarily long, but they also branched in different directions. So what was going straight to the river was also creating rooms and asides, areas where there would be storage perhaps. But once it stopped being storage, then it became like a room that you would have a card table at or a game table at, or you would be able to do a deal in, and
Right.
that's kind of like, the activities kind of fill the gaps, instead of having the intention, it kind of got overtaken. And, most of the locations along the tunnels where they came out to were in the basement of bars and saloons, and they weren't coming out on Main Street like a subway station. Like you just pop up and walk
Right.
up the side of the stairs. You were coming out of someplace into someplace or out of someplace where there was just an opportunity. So
Mm.
and it was all about money. There was an opportunity to make it and take it either way, and they certainly did. And no concern to the risks of lives that they were placing on the line there.
Hmm. So Bert
Yeah.
said it's a little too far to drive unless we get a bus and make haunted stops along the way.
Oh, we can have a hell of a road trip. That's for sure.
But Todd's like definitely no road trip.
Okay, that's fair. It's more like a flight.
So
And Portland's a happening place. Now, and it was then too, for the matter of where it was and what it was. But nowadays it's that kind of. If anybody's ever been to Austin, Texas, their slogan is "Keep Austin Weird." I think Portland's is keep Portland weirder, uh, in a good way. It's eclectic, it's artsy, it's light, it's got a really good, and the Rose City has a reputation, but it also was known once as the Forbidden City, and because the activity was there, it was something where the forbidden being taking you to China. China was the forbidden land.
right.
So it's really interesting how it's cleaned, lack of a better way of saying it, cleaned up its act through the years. But we're talking still into the mid 1900s, until activity finally settled down.
Right.
Um, really, World War II brought about the full final closure of the tunnels, and it's an interesting point to say why is that you know as much as we built guard towers on the East Coast, there weren't as much of that on the West Coast. But there was concern that someone could literally sail up the Columbia River and into the Willamette and get to Portland and find their way into the tunnels and infiltrate the city. So closing it down was a part of national security.
Hmm.
And because it got closed down in the 40s and early 50s, many folks forgot about it because it wasn't needed for what it was then. The commerce part of it went away because we now had overland transportation that was more efficient, and we didn't have the criminal element wasn't there because the tunnels had already been sealed. So
Right.
people kind of lost it for a generation or so, until somewhere in the 70s and early 80s. People started to rediscover what it was. And, you got a wall that looks different than the rest of the basement, like an area of the wall. That was where a door was, and they started knocking down
Mhm.
stuff and finding there they are.
Right.
It's a great example of urban exploring, right? Hey, what's this? Where's this go? Just start trekking through.
Hmm. It sounds like a perfect place for David.
It does. I thought of him the whole way through this. I really did. So, it's definitely something, and that part of it that excites me. That's kind of cool, and I think we talked about this before. Tala, and you brought it up in the pre-show or the pre-investigation episode. Like it's the perfect place for legit or legal urban exploring now because of the
Yeah.
condition of the place. But this is one of those things, and they're serious about not letting people in, access wise, just on their own because of the hazards and dangers. They don't want you to become a resident spirit
Right.
there,
And
getting lost.
there are dangerous areas. We definitely were
Oh yeah,
introduced to some that were questionable.
yes, yeah, we sure were. Yeah, and for Todd and Carmela, make sure you get over into off D wing into the unexplored region, or whatever they call it. Your guides will tell you, but um, is was
Wear
truly maybe
wear
an
good
active place.
shoes.
Yeah,
Yeah, wear good shoes that are you don't mind getting wet.
yeah.
So,
Well, yeah. So that's a lot of it. What do you think, sir? I've talked for a good 35 minutes here or so about it. So
um,
what's your opinion?
I mean, I definitely there again, it's one of those places that has so much energy and so much. I mean, I don't want to say. there wasn't a lot of good energy from what was happening there originally. Again, intent was it for it to be a useful, good place, but it turned into a bad place. Um, with what happened there, what went through there, yeah, I'm sure there's hauntings and energy and things like that. So yeah, it's my vote is yes. I'm sure it's haunted. I'm sure there's things that happen
Yeah.
still. So
I say the same. I think you're going to ask me paranormal or not or active or not. I'm going to say
mhm,
yes. I
mhm,
again for the decades of 100 years worth of activity and bad stuff happened to the people. There are folks who went in there and never came out, and uh, all the negative activity or the negative energy of the active, the crimps and the others, the just the criminal element alone. You know,
mhm.
there are a few stories I didn't share. I have to share this comment
Yeah, I
quick.
got
Yeah,
it.
Todd and Carmela 24-hour challenge to sleep in the tunnels. Yes, I'm in on that. I will do it.
Yep.
Um, but all of that stuff, elements add up, and there's stories that I didn't include of like people claiming to see, like shadow figures with red eyes. I'm like,
Right.
I'm not discrediting it. I can't. I wasn't there. I don't know.
Right.
That's kind of one of those. It could be a lot of things. It could be an animal with eye shine. There's a few things,
Right.
that come to mind immediately that would not be paranormal, but it's interesting. And once you're in a place like this, it's like we said before, sometimes you just need to sit down and be quiet for a while, and during an investigation and let the place tell you its story, you
Right.
know, and it comes to you, it's like when you give people a chance to tell you something about themselves, they chat your ear off, but you have to let it happen. It's sometimes it's
Mhm.
organic versus forced. And I think that's this kind of place, if you have the ability to be there and in some extended window of time, you're on a tour, you get a window, like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours,
Right.
whatever it is, but when you get to place it yourself, like for the 24-hour challenge, um, that's totally different.
Right. So Heather says, I bet the residual energy in the tunnels is
Yes.
crazy. Yes.
Agreed. Completely agree.
And my guess is someplace like that's going to be more residual than
Sure.
anything else.
I
So,
would think so too. Well, you never know. That's why you got to go.
right.
Yeah, I'm gonna step back for a second too to this comment from Todd and Carmela. This is going back to the Tala comments.
Mhm.
Did you have access to the morgue or the medical buildings? Um, Not. We stayed in the main building, which is there's a lot, of course, with 4 floors and wings left and right, and wings on top of wings on top of wings. Who knows? This place just grows and grows on you. But you do have access to go to the area where the lobotomy recovery and also into the surgical ward. So yes, and then also in the surgical ward is the hydrotherapy rooms. So there's a good amount of that, but the others I believe are in other buildings, which are like a separate
They
packet.
are. Yeah.
That and
Um, yeah. Because
the criminal building. I forget what they call it, but
criminally insane building.
thank you. Yeah, those are all separate from the main building.
Yeah. Somebody, I can't remember who it was suggesting a 2 night Tala
Yeah,
investigation where you go do the main building and then you go do the other buildings. So
that was me.
no,
We
because
had we had
somebody,
a comment. We had conversations around it with our group of like
yeah,
a 3 or 4 night event. Where
yeah.
you really have a deep
But
dive.
somebody on Facebook was actually
Oh,
had
okay.
proposed that and was like looking into it.
Okay. Well, and I can't argue that, the
Right.
idea of any place really, and I think when we watch, all the paranormal shows, we know this from talking to the people who are on them, like it's not just, they don't just show up for one day and then they film it and then everything they got is there that time. It's
Right.
highly active or, whatever happens is all like because they're there. They're there for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at times, and that's because that's what it takes literally to have, first of all, you have to build some kind of rapport.
Mhm.
You're a stranger talking to strangers, so you don't know each other. There's that. In a place that doesn't have a whole lot of activity, sometimes it's because the spirits that are there don't understand the equipment that you're trying to get them to use, and it takes a little time to learn. You don't pick up everything immediately, and none of us
Right.
do. Sometimes we do. Don't get me wrong, but it's one of those things where you just have to have that grace period. And this is never, ever, ever in the field an on demand thing. You
Mhm.
just it has to be organic.
Hmm.
So I love the idea of having multiple days. We just don't have the ability to do that with the way we operate and places operate around us.
Right.
Without everything costs something, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you know, if I had $1 million, I would
Now,
be there a couple
Todd,
days.
Todd and Carmela said orbs in the tunnel, question mark.
There's reports, of course,
Oh,
and every time an orb comes up, I go back to our orbs episode, and I start thinking of things like backscatter, where there's just moisture.
yep.
You are underground under the water in the water table at this point, so there's a possibility of it. Some of the collapses are due to water um,
Hmm.
problems, so
Yep.
it's possible. Certainly, I'm never going to say an orbs don't exist, but I just find
Right.
it. I have trouble
So,
believing them.
well,
And then
we
and I know we've had that. Todd and I had that conversation
right.
already.
We'll look at his new capture and see what
Yeah,
he's got. Yep.
yeah, I'd love to see it.
Looking forward to it. So, well, any other thoughts, Jamie?
I think we got it. So I appreciate the opportunity to go and dig into this one. It's something I've been aware of for a long time. And just finally found time to pick it up and get it on the episode. So thanks for indulging me here
Of course.
and
Bird says
going along with it.
he's got 5 weeks vacation. He's in for Tyler.
Yeah, I wish I have four. So
Mm,
mhm. All right,
maybe.
maybe
Well, should,
next year.
what's that?
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year. Well, should we talk about what's coming up, Jamie?
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
All right. So upcoming episodes, we've got Land and Legend Paranormal next week. Confirmed with Stacy tonight, so she's looking forward to it. And there's a reason we're doing that ties into our investigation, so we'll cover that in a little bit. Then you're doing the Morse Jamel Mansion.
Yep.
Then I'm gonna jump into the Dybbuk box. Then Men in Black. And then here's a something we talked in one of the guests or one of the people who watches our show throughout, Menehune, when we talked about some of the other uh, spirits like the Hawaiian ones.
Mhm.
They threw this out, so we're going to I'm going to give that a shot and see what I can find out. I'm looking forward to that because I did a little quick research and it could be a lot of fun.
I'm
So
just happy you said Manahune right. Yes.
we've got several weeks to practice it too.
True. That's right.
So so then we've got, oh, I jumped ahead. Then we've got, we talked about Land and Legend next week, but we're doing a combined para-unity event with them at the brewery on May 17th. So Stacy and Gary from Land and Legend, they do have a podcast. Jamie, you said you caught a little bit of it the other
I
night.
did. I did.
Do you remember the name of it? I always blank.
Oh no. I had it. I had it a second ago.
It'll come back to you.
I can
So,
find it. I can find it very quickly.
I should have it in my notes when
Terrible.
we do this, but
Sorry.
my apologies.
It's the rustic spirit.
The Rustic Spirit podcast. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and
So,
actually a lot of fun. I've listened to a couple episodes today
mhm.
actually, during my work day. So I'm fortunate enough that I can have earbuds in or earbuds, they even call them it anymore, AirPods in, um, and I dug in and I found myself enjoying quite a bit. So
Well, good,
very cool.
good. Well, we'll talk with them next week, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Stacy's an interesting person, and
Yep.
uh, does Reiki and is a sensitive, and so I'm sure she's
Yeah.
going to have a lot to share.
Yeah. Actually, I found a little bit about her background as far as we all have day jobs and what she does there too, and it's
Hmm.
an interesting tie-in as well. So
Yep.
I'm looking forward to this conversation as well.
Good. So, as we said, May 17th, we're at the brewery with a Para-Unity event. June 28th, we are at the Haunted Crescent Sanatorium and Prison Paracon. The 26th of July, we're at the brewery. And then August 16th, we're back at the brewery. So, at least that's what we've got scheduled at this point.
Yep. More to come
Um,
after that.
and then, like we talked earlier, we'll be at the Haunted Crescent Horror and Paracon.
That's a
Uh,
mouthful, isn't it?
it
Like
is.
that's a lot.
Um, so there's that going on. Bert just reminded me that next weekend is the White Hill Paracon, Saturday. Unfortunately, it's something we have a family event that day, so most of my morning's going to be tied up and into the afternoon. So hopefully, I can get over there in the afternoon. But I'm not making any promises. I'd love to see everybody, but I don't think it's going to
Yeah,
happen.
I'm in the same place you are with that, like physically and literally.
Yeah, imagine that.
That Saturday morning thing. So
So,
um, it can't miss opportunity. And I
yeah.
was informed that there is a another family member, a cousin, in a dance recital in the evening. So that's pretty much locked me down.
Yep, that is correct. So, but we will be at that one, the Crescent event.
Yep.
So, and then you know how to find us on social media. But here you go. It's Facebook, YouTube. You found us. We're on TikTok, Instagram. You can email us at paranormallenspodcast@gmail.com and find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those fun things.
Yep. We're out there.
So, so Bert said they're there during the day and doing the investigation that night. That sounds like
Perfect. That's a
a
good
fun
day.
time.
It's a
So,
very good day. All right. And
Todd said he enjoyed the show and stories about being Shanghaied. A multi-day Tala investigation would be nice. So
yeah,
you enjoy the rest of your week too.
we'll put that on the wish list.
So
Yeah. Have a great night, guys. Thanks for coming.
so anything
All right.
else, Jamie?
No, yeah, I think we hit it all. So, again, thanks for everybody for joining us. We always appreciate your journey with us and coming along. The fun stuff we're bringing up soon is all part of a plan. But if there's something you want to hear us do or cover, a place, a location, an opportunity, just feel free to reach out. The email address just goes to Chad at this point. Um, but he'll read it and he'll share it with me, I'm sure, or leave a comment in one of the episodes. We both see that. So with that, or if it's a personal story of your own, we'll be happy to bring it on and even
Hmm.
bring you on to share it with us. So we're always looking for the next thing, and we have a long list of stuff you don't get to see yet, but we add up on it every week as you see the week's episodes fly by. But there's always room for more. The paranormal field is vast and wide, and we're happy to cover it for you. So just let us know. It's
Yep.
easy peasy.
So all right. Well, on that note, we will see everybody next Tuesday right here, and we'll be talking to Land and Legend Paranormal.
Looking forward to it. See y'all then.
Good night.